On September 11th, 2001, in all that chaos and confusion, there was one man whose entire life seemed to have been a preparation for that single morning. He had the clarity to save thousands of lives. This is the story of Rick Rescorla, a man who saw exactly what was coming and just refused to be ignored. This is what Rick Rescorla said on the phone to his best friend while the North Tower was on fire. The official word in his building, the South Tower, was to stay put. But Rescorla, he knew better. This quote just perfectly captures the defiance and the absolute certainty of a man who was about to face the ultimate test. And this number, this is how many lives were hanging in the balance. As the director of security for Morgan Stanley, Rick Rescorla was responsible for the safety of about 2,700 employees, all spread out across 22 floors of the World Trade Center South Tower. So the big question is, right, what gave this one man the foresight to see what was coming? And not just to see it, but to have the courage to prepare for it, and then the absolute conviction to act when every official voice was telling him to stand down? Well, to answer that, we have to go back. We have to understand the man he was long before that day. Yeah, Rick Rescorla's instincts weren't born in some corporate boardroom. They were sharpened on the battlefield. His whole life was, in a way, just a series of trials that prepared him for that final test at the World Trade Center. Just look at the pattern here when you trace his life. He was born in Cornwall, England, and as a boy, he idolized the American GIs who were there getting ready for D-Day. From there, it's like he sought out conflict and service all over the globe. A British paratrooper in Cyprus, a police inspector in northern Rhodesia, and then finally, he fulfills his childhood dream and becomes a soldier in the U.S. Army. And it was really in Vietnam that the legend of Rick Rescorla was born. This photo right here, him in the middle of the brutal Battle of Ia Drang, it's so iconic it actually became the cover of the famous book We Were Soldiers Once and Young. His own commander, Hal Moore, called him the best platoon leader I ever saw. His men called him hardcore because he was so brave, but he was way more than just tough. He was known for his deep compassion. And get this, he would sing these old folk songs from his home in Cornwall to keep his men calm in the absolute heat of battle, a tactic that, amazingly, would become so crucial years later. So after a decorated military career, Rescorla gets into the world of corporate security. But he brings those battlefield senses to a new potential war zone that he identified really early on, the World Trade Center. Years before the first attack, we're talking as early as 1990, Rescorla was already really worried about how vulnerable the towers were. He brought in his old friend from Rhodesia, a counterterrorism expert named Dan Hill, to take a look with him. So they walk right into the basement parking garage, completely unchallenged, no security whatsoever. And Hill gives him this absolutely bone-chilling prediction. He literally points to a critical support column and lays out the exact attack plan that would be used just 3 years later. Rescorla and Hill wrote up this detailed report for the Port Authority, basically begging them for better security. And it was ignored. Then, in 1993, their nightmare came true. A truck bomb goes off almost exactly where they said it would. Rescorla had been proven right in the most tragic way possible. But even after the 93 bombing, Rescorla just believed the threat was far from over. He became convinced the next attack wouldn't come from below, but from the sky. He actually started warning Morgan Stanley that the terrorists would be back, but this time with a plane. He was absolutely convinced an attack was not a matter of if, but when. And since he lost all faith in the Port Authority, Rescorla decided that the only people who could save his employees were the employees themselves. So he took matters into his own hands. He basically became this relentless drill master inside Morgan Stanley. He started these mandatory surprise evacuation drills every few months. And he did not care if you were a top executive in the middle of some billion-dollar deal. When that alarm went off, you evacuated. He'd be there with a stopwatch, barking orders, teaching them to walk down the stairs 2 by 2 to be more efficient. A lot of employees thought he was abrasive, a real nuisance. But Rescorla's philosophy was crystal clear. In a catastrophe, you can't just wait for help. You have to be ready to save yourselves. He was drilling muscle memory and self-reliance into a corporate culture that had no idea what that was. And then, on the morning of September 11th, 2001, every single warning, every drill, every single lesson from Rescorla's life just came into focus. This was the moment he had been preparing for all along. So when the first plane hits the North Tower, an announcement comes over the PA system in the South Tower telling everyone to stay calm and stay at their desks.
Rescorla grabs his bullhorn and immediately overrides that order. On a call with his friend Dan Hill, he said, "I'm getting my people the fuck out of here." He started the evacuation before his own tower was even hit. And as thousands of terrified employees are making their way down these crowded stairwells, Rescorla, the old soldier, does exactly what he did back in Vietnam. He gets on his bullhorn and he starts to sing. He's singing these old Cornish battle hymns, his voice just echoing through the stairwell, keeping people calm, keeping them focused, and keeping them moving. In the middle of all this, he manages to call his wife Susan. She's crying, and he calmly tells her this. He wasn't scared. He was exactly where his entire life had prepared him to be. It was just this moment of pure purpose for him. After getting the vast majority of his people to safety, someone told him he needed to get out too. His response was, "As soon as I make sure everyone else is out." He was last seen on the 10th floor, heading back up the stairs to look for anyone left behind, just moments before the tower fell. And then in the smoke and dust of Ground Zero, the true scale of Rick Rescorla's heroism became just devastatingly clear. All that relentless preparation, it had paid off in a way that no one could have possibly imagined. I mean, just look at this data. It tells the whole story. Of the roughly 2,700 Morgan Stanley employees in the South Tower that day, only 13 were lost. And that number includes Rescorla and his security team, who all stayed behind to get everyone else out. It is one of the most incredible success stories of that entire terrible day. Today, he's remembered as a hero on both sides of the Atlantic. There's a memorial for him in his small Cornish hometown of Hale, and his name is forever etched into the bronze right there at the 9/11 Memorial in New York. The little boy who idolized American soldiers became one of America's greatest heroes. So his story really leaves us with a question, doesn't it? What is the true measure of a hero? Is it just one single act of bravery? Or is it a lifetime of preparation, of seeing what other people won't, and having that stubborn conviction to do what you know is right, no matter who tells you to stand down? I think Rick Rescorla's life proves it's all of the above.